We all know Narnia. Aslan, Cair Paravel, the talking beasts, and the deeper Christian symbolism flowing throughout the stories. But what about the lands that lie beyond the borders of Narnia? One of the most interesting is Calormen, a mighty empire to the south, filled with mighty elites, powerful rulers, deserts, palaces, and a culture far different from anything in Narnia. Most of us will immediately notice the Middle Eastern influences in C.S. Lewis's portrayal of Calormen, but when I was reading The Horse and His Boy, I started to notice details that got me wondering whether Lewis may have drawn his inspiration from somewhere else as well. My theory is that while the country of Calormen reflects Middle Eastern cultures, it also has intriguing similarities to the Mughal Empire in South Asia, and may be blending Islamic, Persian, and Indian influences into one single fictional civilization. Today, we'll look at the evidence and let you decide for yourself. Welcome to Faithful Fables. Before we dive into the comparisons, we should get familiar with Calormen first. On a map of Narnia, you will see Narnia in the north. In The Horse and His Boy, there is a rally cry of onward and upward to Narnia and the north, reinforcing Narnia's northern identity throughout the story. Just south of Narnia lies the country of Archenland, and beyond Archenland, across the great desert, the empire of Calormen. Lewis describes Calormen as ancient, wealthy, and powerful, with a culture that is very different from Narnia's. It is a land of great cities and strict social hierarchy. The name Calormen itself may hint at its geography. One possible origin is that it comes from the Latin calor, meaning heat or warmth, combined with men, suggesting men from a warm land. While Lewis never affirmed this, it is an interesting thought, and I think that sums it up. Lewis describes the Calormens as wise, wealthy, courteous, cruel, and ancient, showing us that Calormen isn't a barbaric kingdom. It's cultured and wealthy, but beneath that lies cruelty and an obsession with power. At the core of Calormen stands the Tisroc, the ruler of the empire who governs from his palace. Lewis tells us that he is ruthless and deeply concerned with expanding his empire. At one point, he even says that he can't sleep because he knows that the Narnians are still free. I found this to be an interesting parallel with historical royal courts, where rulers are surrounded by wealth and absolute authority. Another detail that caught my attention is attached to the Tisroc's name. When someone says his name, they add the phrase, "May he live forever." This reminds me of some of the phrases used for honor in religious and royal traditions, including expressions like "peace be upon him," after mentioning revered figures in Islamic traditions. I'm not saying this was intentional, but it struck me as another interesting parallel. The Tisroc has an advisor known as the Grand Vizier. This is a title with deep historical roots throughout the Islamic world. Once again, this is an interesting parallel that would fit well within the picture Lewis paints of Calormen. The Grand Vizier in The Horse and His Boy is an elderly man who is promised Aravis in marriage. Aravis is still very young at the time and is actively trying to escape this arrangement. This highlights the lack of power that women have in Calormen. Arranged marriages involving significant age gaps appear in many historical societies, including various cultures across Asia and the Middle East. Now, you may think that these details on their own are simply a coincidence, but we are only getting started, and the list of similarities keeps growing. If you walked through the city of Tashbaan, you'd see impressive statues of gods and heroes around the streets. One of the differences between Narnia and Calormen that I think is important is the treatment of animals. In Narnia, the talking beasts have individual freedoms. In Calormen, talking horses like Wen and Bree are captured, enslaved, and treated poorly. They are often overworked and eventually sold off when no longer useful. The Narnians show respect for even non-talking creatures and will only ride horses in times of war. These details don't really point to the Mughal Empire specifically, but it does reinforce the picture Lewis is trying to paint for us. We see the ruling class of Calormen living in extreme luxury. The Tarkans and Tarkinas are surrounded by perfume, fine clothing, and displays of wealth, while the lower classes live in much harsher conditions. This is another reminder that Calormen is a society built around hierarchy and status rather than the equality seen in Narnia. One detail I noticed is how Lewis described the long beards of the Calormen nobles. The beards are perfumed, oiled, and even dyed. I found this to be an interesting parallel because beard grooming and perfuming was practiced in the Mughal Empire, where appearance carried social importance. The wealthy also wear turbans and decorated robes. I couldn't help but notice that this is yet another interesting parallel with the Islamic and Mughal courts, where luxurious clothing is served as a visible symbol of status and prestige. Lewis describes Calormen soldiers as carrying scimitars and wearing chainmail and spiked helmets, a detail that once again points to the military traditions of the Middle Eastern and Persian worlds. Lewis portrays the women in Calormen as living under social constraints, with their marriages often arranged and personal freedoms are limited. We saw this reflected earlier in Ervis's story, where she wants to flee rather than submit to the future that was chosen for her. Another aspect of the Calormen society that strikes me is the presence of slavery. In The Horse and His Boy, Lewis presents slavery as normal to the culture. This is in contrast with Narnia, where freedom is central to society. Historically, slavery has existed in many civilizations, including the Middle East and the Mughal Empire. While this book is not a historical account, it is another interesting parallel that makes Calormen recognizable with the patterns of these societies. In the story, slavery clearly functions as part of C.S. Lewis's moral and spiritual themes. So far, we've looked at the government, the ruling class, the clothing, perfumed beards, and military imagery. On their own, none of these things prove my theory, but together, they paint a picture that is hard to ignore. Lewis mentions wine at Calormen feasts. While Islamic teaching prohibits alcohol, historical records show that members of some royal courts, including the Mughal Empire, did consume wine despite religious restrictions. Religion in Calormen appears to be complex in comparison to Narnia. The chief deity is called Tash, who is described as having a vulture head, multiple arms, and is associated with death and fear. Alongside Tash are two other deities, known as Azeroth and Zardina, a moon goddess associated with women and marriage. From a Narnian perspective, this contrasts sharply with Aslan's clear moral and spiritual center. Calormen is represented as polytheistic and ritualistic and morally ambiguous. Once again, this struck me as another interesting parallel when considering the kind of cultures Lewis may have drawn from. Historical empires across the Middle East, Persia, and South Asia often have overlapping religions and mythologies rather than a single unified system. Calormen feels similar in the sense that it is not based off of a specific religion, but a mix of cultural imagery of an empire that has religion, politics, and authority intertwined. In the Chronicles, Tash has a role in the last battle, where Lewis uses him to expose false worship and to show that service to gods is not what it appears to be. When we look at everything together, we see a pattern emerge. Calormen is portrayed as an ancient and wealthy empire with a strict social class, powerful rulers, and a deeply structured society. Culture is emphasized by luxury, status, and authority, while in contrast to the simplicity and freedom found in Narnia. In this video, we looked at what I think are several interesting parallels: the government, social structure, clothing, military imagery, slavery, and religion. These parallels seem to echo some historical aspects from the Middle East, Persia, and South Asia, including the Mughal Empire. On their own, these details don't show a direct connection, and even when you put them together, it would be too strong to say that Calormen is simply a fantasy version of the Mughal Empire. It seems more likely that C.S. Lewis drew from a mix of cultural and historical influences to create a country that feels familiar. Calormen may not be a representation of a specific empire, but a mix of several that serves it as a contrast to Narnia. So whether Lewis consciously intended every one of these parallels or not, the result is the same. Calormen is a complex counterpart to Narnia. And in the end, that's what makes it so interesting. Thanks for watching and stay faithful.